Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're so excited to be with you today and talk about the futures of land justice. We're just gonna be here a moment as folks trickle in. Thank you to Amy, our wonderful tech person today, who will be supporting us in our time together. Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop the share and just see faces. Hello, hello, Sister Eleanor. We got Sister Janet. Okay, hi, Diane. Wow, well, thank you for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. We are Land Justice Futures. This is our new name. The organization which you have previously known as Nuns and Nuns, or the Nuns and Nuns Land Justice Project, is now Land Justice Futures. So yeah, this is a special moment for us, and we're grateful to have you with us to mark it. Today's event, featuring the land justice movement, will be featuring 4 incredible speakers who will be invoking the world to come and that is coming. We're hosting this event as part of marking this transition to a new name, but also just to mark a new year of growing and deepening in this work. We realized that this week is actually the 2-year anniversary since we launched Land Justice Futures, the course, the original series of webinars that we did. So in some ways, this is our team's birthday. And so thank you for being here to mark it with us. For those who are newer to our work, we at Land Justice Futures are committed to creating new land transitions rooted in racial and ecological healing. In a world where 98% of private land in the US is owned and controlled by white people, and around 1,500 acres of farmland are developed every day, we define land justice as the practice of centering ecological, social, and racial justice in decisions about how land is used, how it's loved, how it's governed by people. And land justice has 3 interwoven components: protecting land from extraction, regenerating her health, and restoring equity, ownership, and stewardship to Black, Indigenous, and other dispossessed communities. As religious communities discern the future of the lands that they own and have loved for generations, we support them to incorporate land justice into that process. So we're kind of like a one-stop shop for exploring how land justice can become a central part of your property plan. So we do that in a lot of ways. Webinars like this one, we go deep with historical education with the communities we're working with. We support with relationship building and technical assistance. And we just launched into the 2nd year of the 2nd cohort of our Focus Community program, which is a 2-year community of practice where we are working with 14 religious communities across the country. So you can learn more about the Focus Community program with the link in the chat. We have a lot of members of our Focus communities here with us today. So welcome to our Focus Community members. Thank you for being here and being on this journey with us, as you have been for the last year or the last month if you're a newer member of the cohort. So we do this work because we believe that healing from the harms of colonialism and capitalism is required for transitioning towards a just and livable future for all of us. And we believe that religious communities and the lands they love can be a really powerful part of those futures. Today, to invoke those futures to come on closer to us, we want to honor the visionary and courageous leaders who are bringing the futures of land justice to life on the ground. So you'll hear from a set of land projects from different parts of the country doing different kinds of work and offering different things to the world. also in different stages of development and with different relationships to religious communities. And so you'll hear from those folks. You'll also hear from a sister who is part of a focus community and is an active member of that community's team. So those are the folks that we're going to be elevating and bringing into conversation today, and we'll be touching on a bunch of different things. So, you know, the joys and challenges of this work, what's on the horizon, what bold visions are motivating and exciting them today, and what they might require. So we're going to be getting started. But before we do, we need to continue to lift up what we've been speaking about for the last 5 months in ways that we can, which is to lift up and mourn what is happening in Palestine and to make clear calls to action to stop the violence. Palestine is, as many across movements will say, one of the most acute and critical front lines of US imperialism. In witnessing the occupation and the siege and the mass atrocities done by the Israeli government with US funding and support, we see an evolving extension of the kind of settler colonialism that we are seeking to repair here on Turtle Island. We see similar tactics used to control and eradicate a people, like military occupation, segregation, blockade, forced removal, the prevention of humanitarian aid and the spread of disease, the destruction of civic infrastructure and cultural memory, as well as the harming and removing and killing of children and youth. And we are horrified daily, as I'm sure you are, by the footage of a genocide happening right before our eyes. And so we just want to take this moment to continue to name that and to ask for you to join us in our demand for a permanent and lasting ceasefire, an end to the blockade of aid, and for solutions that address root causes and center the freedom and safety for every person in the region, be they Palestinian, Arab, Israeli, Muslim, Christian, Jewish. And yeah, we'll be organizing an upcoming webinar with Palestinian and Jewish speakers to discuss what's going on in Palestine and make connections to land justice writ large. In the meantime, we hope that you will continue to be showing up in the ways that you can in the streets and in your communities, on the phone with representatives. If you're looking for where to donate, the Middle East Children's Alliance is our recommendation. Money goes directly to local, on the ground, neighborhood by neighborhood partners in Palestine who are triaging needs in Gaza and delivering food and aid to families. And so you can find some links for that in the chat. We also want to continue to uplift Christians for a Free Palestine. We've been sending out some emails about the stuff they've been organizing. I think there's a whole array of actions across the country on March 18th, as well as a mass training in March in DC on April 8th and 9th. Also, you know, please check out your local Jewish Voice for Peace chapter or Palestinian Youth Movement chapter. You don't have to be Jewish to organize with Jewish Voice for Peace. That's who I organize with locally. So we want to name those things because we can't be in integrity with this work here without recognizing and being in solidarity with the struggles for land justice, for sovereignty, for self-determination around the world and right now in Palestine especially. So thank you for hearing us in this moment. Yeah, it's critical to keep talking about this. And in the future that we're working towards very much includes this struggle for peace and justice. So, okay, thanks for being with us in that. I am now going to invite our friends to be spotlit with me, bring our speakers up, our esteemed speakers and friends. We have Bridget Kelly of Root Springs out on Dakota lands in Minnesota. We have Carla Maria Perez of Movement Generation and the upcoming Justice and Ecology Center out on Lisjanaloni and Bay Miwok lands in the Oakland Hills of California. We have Tila Troge of the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers and Neamuk Land Trust on Shinnecock lands out on Long Island. And we have Sister Joan Gallagher of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Brentwood, New York, also on Secatog and Shinnecock land. Thank you all for being with us. I'm really thrilled to be having this conversation with you as we celebrate the many futures for land justice ahead of us. The ones that are yet to be known but are being steadily worked towards and danced towards. It's an honor to have you with us. As a way of introducing ourselves or yourselves, and hopefully in what is a more fun way or more grounded way, we're gonna do a little virtual altar building to get started. And so I've asked each of you to bring something with you that can support in sharing who you are and the community you're a part of and the work that you do and this land project that you're here representing. So with that, I'll kick it off to Carla. I'll start with you because you're on this part of my screen. We'll go around to Bridget, Joan, and then Tila.
Great. Good evening. Buenas tardes, everyone. Good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes. I'm Carla Maria Perez. I'm really honored to be here with you all for this particular focus that we're going to share. And what I have are two things from the land site in Canyon that is part of our land justice project. And this is a beautiful turkey feather and a bundle of cedar. And you'll see the cedar from the cedar tree is mostly dried out. And that's because I spent a year in upstate New York, actually, while like just soon after we liberated the land. And so these were my connection to the land while I was far away. But turkey, very special relative in my tradition too, south of the border, and cedar, a very important prayer medicine for me and so many other relatives. So offering this for everyone. Aho.
Awesome. Thanks, Carla. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Bridget Kelly. I use she, they pronouns. I'm here representing the fields at Root Springs, located in Minnesota in a town called, that is westernly referred to as Annandale. It's about an hour and 15 minutes northwest of the Twin Cities. And we are a retreat center that is focused on offering rest and respite for BIPOC and queer folks. And we'll get into that a little bit more in today's conversation. I brought two altar pieces. The first one I'm gonna share with you all is more of a personal one, and hopefully we can see it well, but this is my mommy. Yeah, she's gorgeous. My sunlight is very odd in my room right now. So this is my mom, and she is the reason I personally, individually am here in so many ways, here obviously on this earth, and then also the reason why I'm so connected to land and land justice in the first place. The story of how I came to Minnesota was I was born in California, but my mother, who was a Brooklyn native, met my dad in like LA County, and then had visited my dad's family here in Minnesota, in southern Minnesota, and she had never seen so much.
Oh no, Bridget, you're frozen. If you can hear us, maybe try turning off your video, as sad as that might make us.
Land before. Can you hear me? My
We
internet
can. We can hear you, and you I think you cut off right around when you were talking about your parents' meeting.
Okay. If this continues, I will call in, and then that usually gets rid of it, but I will miss having you all see me during this then. My apologies with technology. But my mother came out to Minnesota to visit my father's side of the family. My grandmother hails from Austin, Minnesota, in that region. And she had never seen so much land before, and she wanted her children to grow up close to land. So they sold their house in California, about a 5-acre, what
Mm.
Ooh. Bridget, we might
I
need to
referred
come back to you. If you want to call in, yeah, we really want to hear what you have to say in your story, and that might be the best way to do it. For now, Joan, maybe if you want to jump in, and then we'll go to Tila.
Sure. Good. Hello, everybody. Good day to you all. I bring and share with you this earthen pot from El Salvador, and within it is soil from the garden where the 6 Jesuits at the university, along with their housekeeper and her daughter, were martyred by the military, probably armed by funded weapons from the United States. But also in it is mixed soil from different areas of Long Island where I have walked. And it serves to me as a reminder of how the 13 tribes across Sewanaka that we know as Long Island walked lightly on the land, made their home, grew their food, and cared for the land. And this soil is held in memory of the indigenous presence, the many that were displaced and moved, most often forcibly, from the land, and for those who have crossed over. And on it hangs a little word of peace. And until we can piece our relationships together and reconcile the past, there will not be this kind of peace. So thank you, and I'm happy to be with you all.
Hi everyone, my name is Tila. I'm from the Shinnecock Nation, and I brought this beautiful gift that my mother gave me at my baby shower. It's a cross made out of wampum shells. And wampum is it's a beautiful purple and white shell, a clam shell that only grows in our region on Long Island. The purples, the deep purples that you see only appear here. And if you know about wampum, it's the first currency that was exchanged in the United States on Wall Street. It's a mechanism to transmit ideas, values, kinship systems. But I wanted to bring this because it shows our deep connection to the land, and also it recognizes that a lot of our survival and continued survival is so linked to our spiritual beliefs, and our and one of our reverends, Reverend Paul Cuffey, had a chapel very close by to the retreat center of the Sisters of St. Joseph, where we have our kelp farm today. And so it's a very sacred place for us, and we were able to stay in that place until around 1897, when we were finally forcefully removed. And it's really significant that we are able to access our waterways and have our kelp farm in this exact location now. It's a place that, prior to the Sisters of St. Joseph allowing us access to, we hadn't been to since, you know, those days of us praying in our Indian chapel in the late 1890s. And so I wanted to bring that because it's something really special to me, and it, I think, really shows our interconnectedness as well as our steadfast traditions and cultures. And one of the really important reasons why we started the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers was because we saw a lot of damage due to ocean acidification happening to our wampum, and we started seeing the loss of that. Again, it's beautiful purple, deep purple. We started seeing a loss of the purple color due to the excess carbon in the water and the atmosphere. And so it's part of our mission to be able to restore and protect our cultural legacy, and something that we do in partnership and sisterhood with the Sisters of St. Joseph.
Thank you, Tila and Joan and Carla. And Bridget, I see that you have been able to join us again. I'm curious if you'd like to unmute and continue with your story and your introduction.
I will do my best. Yeah, I'll keep it a little bit brief so we can move on to the conversation. But I just wanted to share that picture of my mother because I think so often when I've felt my affinity to nature being expressed through time outdoors, camping, navigation, swimming, a lot of things that people assume that Black people especially don't do, or that like we don't know how to do. There's a lot of stereotypes about Black people and their connections to the outdoors. And so I'm just so grateful that my mother is my connection, my first connection to nature and outdoors. And I like that I'm very fortunate and grateful that she had that forethought for us and wanted us to grow up with a connection to the outdoors. And that's why I still protect it and care for it and play with it and grieve in it to this day.
Thank you, Bridget. Well, with this altar created with our speakers and just thank you for sharing something personal with all of us. It really feels like it brings us closer to the ground of this work and the soul of this work. Let's just start this conversation. I'd love for us to talk about a little bit more about the work of each of your projects, what each of your projects is seeking to do and how you do what you do. And if each of you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about how you got access to the land, how you got ownership of the land. This is a group that is really interested in how land justice transitions might be possible and the varied ways that can look like. So if you could share a little bit about that as well, I think folks present would be appreciative. Carla, can we start with you?
Sure. Greetings again, everyone. I'm actually going to share my screen, so just give me one moment to do that. Oops, my Zoom bar is in the way and I can't. Oh, here it is down here. Okay. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. Thank you so much again, Sarah and everyone. I'm really looking forward to hearing about the other projects. I've heard Tila speak before and it's amazing. So what they're doing. So yeah, everyone is very blessed today. So again, my name is Carla Maria Perez. I was born in San Francisco. I'm here. My family is from Mexico and El Salvador. Those two countries. So it was really touching to see your altar offering, Joan, from El Salvador. Yeah, I've spent time in both countries quite a bit. So, and I'm a mother, I'm an organizer, I'm an initiated priestess in my tradition in Mexico, the Mesoamerican tradition. And I absolutely and positively am just in love with creation and the brilliance of creation. It's like what moves me every day. So this is like a dream come true to be doing this for my life work, that is also how I sustain my needs. So a huge blessing. So yeah, I'm really happy to talk about our land justice project with the Segurate Land Trust. And the canyon rematriation is really how movement generation, or MG for short, how we are manifesting our vision of ecological justice. Just real quick, we understand ecological justice as a state of balance between human communities and thriving ecosystems based on mutually beneficial relationships and participatory self-governance, sort of like how the earth just was, before there was the global colonial project began. And as an ecological justice project dedicated to the liberation and restoration of land, labor, and culture, rematriating this land with our local native relatives is our strategic intervention in the ongoing attempts of colonization to enclose, extract, and homogenize, right? So much pain, as we know, trauma and suffering has occurred as a result of rampant land theft. And it's so clear globally that where Native peoples are able to steward the lands that they're from, the natural ecosystems thrive, right? And they thrive in a way that we really need them to thrive right now for all of our sakes, right? And for 7 generations and beyond into the future. Right. So we know this. And so overall, this feels like a healing project, it's about healing generational and ancestral wounds, both for people and the land itself. Integrity is a really central value for us, right? We try to not promote anything, put anything out there that we don't really stand behind, right? So for example, we believe in decentralized power. So we developed a decentralized governance structure for our collective, right? So if we believe that returning land to its original stewards is necessary in order to heal the land itself, and heal the wounds of generations of land theft and disconnection, then rematriating land was eventually going to be an action we would take. It's been a while in the coming, I think. In terms of this model, our model, I'll move to the next photo. Yeah, so in terms of our model, we've learned actually that land-back models, whether it's reparations, rematriation, or takebacks, have many, many forms. And I like to talk about our model in terms of get it back, make it better, protect it forever. If you've listened to MG talk about this, land justice work, we often describe it that way. And the way that this happened for us was through our relationship with the Segorite Land Trust, which is an urban Indigenous women-led organization and land trust with Lijan Aloni leadership. And they found out about the acres. I just have to name that 2 people on this call, Sarah being one of them, and Cassandra, who's in the audience, were literally present at the one deal breaker meeting we had with the owners. It was so emotional and high stakes. My gosh. Anyways, but so, right, they found out about these 43 acres of land in the East Bay Hills and asked us if we'd be interested in working together to liberate it. The land is in ancestral Bay Miwok territory and had been held for over 100 years by a private family through the violence and enclosure of the Homestead Act. Is one of the few parcels in the East Bay still being held in that form of land theft when we came upon it. And while it's Bay Miwok ancestral territory, the Bay Miwok and the Lijan Aloni are close relatives and are both part of a confederated villages of Lijan, which includes the Bay Miwok folks. So if Segorite was ever to want to release themselves of the title, the land would go to the Confederation, which is great. And we made the transfer on winter solstice in 2022, which is incredibly significant because winter solstice marks the return of the light, right? And so we see that being so significant where on that day, the land was passed from private ownership, right? So one of the pieces of land justice you talked about is what is the form of title, right? So private enclosed ownership, where lots of abusive dynamics were happening with and on the land, to original stewards and a group of people who are dedicated to healing and liberating. So I think it's big. And let's see, in terms of the purchase itself, they say to be ready, you got to stay ready, right? So Movement Generation had been staying ready with our relationship to funders over the past several years who wanted to support our vision for a justice and ecology center in or near the metropolitan center of the Bay Area. So when the time came, we were prepared to raise the funds, and Segorite now holds the deed. And in reciprocity, they gave us their blessing to develop or to care for the land, right? For at least one generation. We're going to revisit stewardship in one generation because this is a long-term game. So we'll see what the land wants at that time. They also gave us permission to build what for now we're calling a Justice and Ecology Center, which we see as a retreat space and resilience hub for social movement actors, right? For organizers, earth workers, healers, cultural organizers, etc. I think the last thing I'll say is that we are, and I'll move on to another set of photos. You can see these are some of the buildings. So this is like the open grassland, and this is the main building that we actually use to work in. This picnic bench open space is right outside that main building. This is an empty pool. We don't know what's going to come of it yet, but some aquaponics. And this is actually the residential home that's there, and a garage that has a studio space. The last thing, that I'll mention is that we are near the headwaters of the Lijan Creek watershed, or also known as San Leandro Creek watershed. And we are in the middle of a couple of ecotones, which makes this really special. An ecotone is a transition from one ecosystem to another, right? So on the site, we have third growth redwoods at some of the higher elevations, and it blends down into mixed oak woodland, and then oak savanna and open grassland. And we're also in the middle of the ecotone between the open space and rural space of the East Bay Hills and the city of Oakland, which are two very different ecosystems and environments. And we're just really so fortunate to have the opportunity to remember and reconnect with what it is to be intimately aware of your place in the web of life in a place, right? Like humans, we're like, the web of life is there and we watch and interact with it, but like we are it. We're part of it, we are it. And so like sinking into that in this new relationship is the hugest gift. So anyway, I'll stop there for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla. I gotta say, Movement Generation has been such a teacher for us, in terms of like how you frame and educate about a just transition and bioregional governance and worldview, and like the way that justice and ecology must be so intertwined. And so my heart is thrilled, when I think about this site being really a demo site for the world that we need and deserve and are working towards. So I want to celebrate that, and also name, like there are so many creative ways to support land transitions to happen, and sometimes it just means showing up in a meeting with a charismatic sister with some owners who might be moved by such a presence. So
Like what happened when we went to Canyon together. That's what happened. It was beyond words. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, so, without going public with things that maybe people don't want to go public with, just there's a lot of ways to be in solidarity and kinship and friendship with these projects coming to life. So I think, let's see, Bridget, I meant to chat you. Are you able to share your screen, or do you just want to speak to a little bit of what Root Springs is doing and how y'all came into relationship with that land?
Yeah. Let me know. I'm also called in, so if you give me a sign, I will unmute myself on the call. So I've got myself set up. Yeah, so to talk a little bit about Root Springs, I'll just type into the chat our organization website for folks to reference in the future. I highly encourage you to check us out, learn more about us on there. In terms of the story of the land, obviously before any of us were there, this land belonged to particularly like the Dakota people here in Minnesota. And then moving forward in terms of like when we're starting to talk about our history, and that is also maybe in relation to this group here, is that in 1988, the land was acquired by the Franciscan Sisters of Little Falls, and was essentially turned into a retreat center. So a lot of folks that we're even in community with still, they were children growing up on the land in Annandale. They have memories there. In 2015, it was passed on to a couple, Joan and Dan, who are then the stewards of the land from 2015 till about 2020. And then, here in Minnesota, as everyone here is well aware, we had one of many incredible traumas, but that actually gained national attention in 2020, which was the murder of George Floyd. And even prior to George Floyd's murder, the community had been grieving and organizing around other particularly young Black men that had lost their lives to the police violence that we experience here. And there were some folks in the arts and healing community that were organizing a retreat at this space that used to be referred to as Wellspring. And then that kind of fell through because the pandemic hit, and they were starting to organize, saying that, like, hey, the people that are on the front lines, the activists, the artists, the healers, like, we need a place to go to rest. Like, we are exhausted. We are on the front lines day in, day out doing this. When other people, it's convenient for them to show up, that's when they're showing up. But we are here. We've been here before we were considered quote unquote activists. We're going to be here far after people stop caring about this. And so there were people, can you hear me okay? There were people getting together to really talk about organizing space and retreat space specifically for folks that find themselves on the front lines, particularly people of color, and also queer community and folks that find themselves at that intersection. And as I mentioned, that sort of organizing fell through a tiny bit after their first meeting because the pandemic arose, and then we had the murder of George Floyd. But Joan and Dan, who were the stewards of the land at that time, they were looking to move on and no longer be the stewards of the land. And they decided that they really wanted to ensure that if possible, the land would get handed down, or the next people to purchase the land would specifically be from the BIPOC community. So because some folks had started doing some organizing with Wellspring being their location of doing so, Joan and Dan had reached out to the group and asked if there was anyone who was in a position to be the next stewards of the land. And as you can see in this picture that's up right now, oh, they're gone. But
I'll go back.
it's okay. Signe, who is the second in from the left, was a part of that conversation, as well as I think maybe Aaron, who is third in from the right. And they were a part of that group and started talking about how neither of them individually could really afford to do this, but then Signe had significant experience in some housing cooperative work back in New York, where they were trying to basically purchase space in New York City with the essentially so that other people couldn't, so that developers couldn't come in and purchase it. So Signe had been familiar with cooperative structure before, and originally the land had been then passed on to three queer couples of color, Signe and her partner Alice, who Alice is right next to Signe on the far left, and then Aaron and Zoe, who are kind of in the center of that photo there. And then there was another couple originally a part of the cooperative. So these three BIPOC queer couples came together and said, we are going to organize cooperatively to try to purchase this land and offer the space, go beyond just like a single retreat program, but we really want to create a retreat space that folks that find themselves at the intersection of queer and BIPOC identities, specifically artists, activists, and healers, can come and really spend time and reconnect with the land and heal themselves and just have that space to find rest and respite, so that they can breathe and go back to the work that that we're so often doing. So that was in 2020 when they started to move on to the land, understanding what does it mean to even take over and operate a retreat center. None of them had done anything like that before. And we also activated on a large fundraising campaign so that we could purchase the land outright. So the land was not being like handed over, given, but essentially they wanted to make sure that the transfer was to people of color, but we still had to pay for the land. So we had a very successful fundraising campaign in which in 2021, we were able to purchase the land outright. So now the cooperative folks, there's 4 of them currently, 4 of the original 6, and they own the land. So we own the land outright. Yeah, it was very exciting. We're finding that even when you own the land, there's a lot of things you can and can't do depending on like what kind of county you're in and zoning and things like that. So yeah, have been very excited. And as you can see in some of these pictures, we have, the land came with 3 hermitages. That's our language for cottages. We've been renaming the hermitages to basically be named after queer, specifically like women of color and folks of note. We have a wellness center that we've spent the last 9 months renovating. We are just at the very tail end of a major renovation. We've been closed since June, and I am eager and itching for us to welcome folks back to the land. But this was a part of the original fundraising. So we were able to raise a total of $2 million total. Some of that was to purchase the land outright. Some of that was used for this wellness center rebuild. And then the third was to bring on staff. So we hired myself and 2 other staff in 2023 to start moving towards doing more programming. In the first couple of years of it becoming Root Springs, which was in 2020, or 2021, we just celebrated our 3rd year of ownership and operation. We were really just trying to figure out, like I mentioned before, like how do we run a retreat center? How do we do this? Like what are the systems that need to be in place? How much does everything cost? But we were finding from folks is, so most of them were coming out individually on their own for solo retreat. But a lot of folks right now, what we're looking towards is more programming opportunities for folks to just come in and plug in and not have to do a solo retreat. So that's a little bit about us. I know there are a lot of other questions and I want to make sure we get to everyone else. So yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. And yeah, I'm struck by your sharing about just like the learning curve of running a retreat center. And I'm also highly conscious that like most communities of women religious I know have run retreat centers. So I'm like, is there a way to support like that, if there are other invitations for supporting the operations or just like what that looks like, or I'm noticing that in real time of like, there's a lot of people on this call who have run retreat centers. So I'm just naming that as a pathway for support and solidarity. And yeah, shout out to the FSLF sisters in the house in this new evolution of the land that you cared for and held a retreat center in, and the ways that it's serving the moment and the people who need it now. Tila, I'd love to move to you real quick. Well, not real quick. Share what you want to share. I always love hearing you speak about pretty much anything. Yeah, I'm curious if you could tell folks who don't already know about the Shinnecock kelp farmers a bit about your project, and then we'll go to Joan to talk a little bit about your end of that project.
Sure. So I do have some photos which I'll share briefly. I was inspired by everyone else showing their photos. I wasn't going to originally, but a little bit about our project. I was telling you a little bit about our canary in the coal mine, which was our wampum, and us noticing the loss of the purple color. But we had an even bigger problem than that. We live in the largest unsewered district in the United States. And so that means since colonization occurred in 1640, there were no wastewater treatment centers built, there was no sewer systems built. And basically, and also our neighbors are some of the wealthiest people in the entire world. We're adjacent to the town of Southampton, so it's literally billionaires, power players, you name it. So there's not really any excuse for why this like really critical sanitation infrastructure doesn't exist. But we, as coastal people who have survived off the bounty of the water for almost 13,000 years since the last ice age created the island that we live on, found ourselves in this really devastating situation where all of our food source it was completely dead. A couple of years ago, the Biden-Harris administration named our waters federal fisheries disaster zones because we lost 99.99% of our bay scallops, which are formerly like a huge part of our economy and our existence and our sustenance. And so we were looking for different ways to remediate the water that surrounds our territory. And so if this project, the growing sugar kelp, which is a type of seaweed, first came on our radar around 2019 when we had partnered with a group called the Baconic Estuary Program, who recommended surrounding our entire territory with the sugar kelp in order to combat the excess carbon that was in the water causing the acidification. And so as we started to learn more about sugar kelp, we found that it thrived on excess nitrates. And so when you dump raw sewage into the water, it causes a situation where the water has too much nitrogen. And when you have too much nitrogen, it depletes all the oxygen. And, you know, we know that we need water and oxygen in order to survive. So we found that we were able to dramatically and drastically increase the biodiversity of the region and bring back some of the species that we had lost through actively farming sugar kelp. We had all kinds of creatures from seahorses, sharks, scallops, oysters, even shorebirds, which we were not expecting. We had partnered with the Nature Conservancy, and our local chapter director of the Nature Conservancy was like an avid bird watcher, and I've like never seen anyone so excited. He came to our farm one day and he's like, I live on the Shinnecock Bay and I haven't seen that bird in 25 years and I can't believe this. So the impact on biodiversity is really incredible. The water quality has like skyrocketed from our efforts, but we're really cognizant of the fact that it's not something that we can do alone. So we work really hard to share our mission. I'll share my screen just so you could see, a little bit. So these are our hatcheries. So we have a hatchery in the cabin of one of the sisters retreat center, which is located again on our ancestral territory, where most of our tribal members originate from before we were removed by the state of New York illegally in the 1800s. It's really beautiful. We transformed this cabin at the retreat center into a hatchery where we control everything. It's like a nursery. We control the water temperature, the amount of light that these kelp seedlings get. We wild dive for them, and we keep them in the hatchery for about 6 to 8 weeks, and then we outplant them out into the bay. So this is us outplanting into the bay. We use shallow water farming techniques, so we don't use any boats or anything. We go out in insulated water waders. This is cold weather, so we are done with our hatchery by about December, and we're outplanting by the beginning of January. So we're out in the water January, February, March, April, and then we start to harvest in May. This is another shot of our setup in the hatchery. So we completely rebuild this every season. We literally share the space with the sisters who do their retreats. But in the off time in the winter, we set up our hatchery. We completely transform the entire space. This is a picture of some of the devastating effects of a type of algae called slip gut. So that's what happens when you have too much nitrogen and other types of pollution. So on this line, it had completely suffocated out our kelp, which was a little disappointing. But you can see here how beautiful, absolutely beautiful the waters are. And so one of the things that really connected us with the Sisters of St. Joseph, who have the retreat centers, is our connection, both spiritually and through our values with their land ethics. I think one of my first times going to the mother house in Brentwood, I met with one of the leaders, Sister Karen, and she gave me this little card and she's like, you got to read this, you got to read this. So I'm like, okay, I got to read this card. And it was the Sisters land ethics policy, and it just resonated so closely and clearly with what our mission is to protect Mother Earth. And so we consider ourselves not only land defenders, but also water protectors. And I love this shot because this is walking down the stairs where we get to go to our farm. But if you look out, you can see two things. So on the left, you can see a barrier island. It's called Billionaires Row. So it's this little tiny strip of land that separates the Shinnecock Bay from the Atlantic Ocean. And it's these mega estates. So it's like $275 million estates. And then on the right, you can see completely undeveloped land, and that's the Shinnecock territory, where most of us live now. It's this 800-acre peninsula that was reserved for us after our lands were stolen. And but as you can see, it's just gorgeous, and it's something that to us is worth everything to protect for our future generations. And we do everything by hand. We do everything out of love, out of respect, for all creation, for the water, for the sea life, for the kelp. One of our main programs is called Kind Words. And so we invite our children and also our partners and our sisters to say kind words to our kelp shortly before we outplant them. And it's one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had in my life, having these Zooms with the sisters, and they're praying for the good work that the kelp are going to do and really preparing them for their mission to clean the water and remedy some of the ecological disaster that we've seen. And so we spread our message by educating as many people as we can, inviting folks to come down to the retreat center. We recently had a mural done by one of our Shinnecock artists that is called Return to Good Ground, and it shows how we originated in the land where the retreat center is, but it also shows our return to do this work and to grow kelp and to increase the biodiversity and really allow life in all of its different forms to flourish and reconnect and rebalance and restore and regenerate, and all the wonderful things that we're working so hard to do. This just gives you an idea of the growth. It grows pretty rapidly because of all the excess nitrogen. It's really amazing. This is Sister Carrie. She runs the retreat center at the Sisters of St. Joseph, and she is like one of the most hands-on member of our team. She's always out there no matter what the weather conditions, really being a true partner in what we do. Just give you a little bit idea. This is a drone overlay, so you can see those light lines are our farm. And so it's not complicated, but it's really beautiful, and it's something that we're doing because, like I said, we're surrounded by the richest folks on earth, but there's no desire, no will to take action to improve the water quality. So us as 6 Indigenous women are really inspired to take that action and have others join us. And kind of lead the way. And so again, the access and being back there is so critical to us, and it's something that the sisters provided for us. And so just a little bit of background on how that occurred. The sisters, generation back had a relationship with our elders, but more recently we had experienced what we call economic warfare from the state of New York. And so we had a 28-day direct action protesting New York State. And we invited people from all over the country to come, and they came, but we realized that we needed some place for everyone to shower. And this was during the worst part of the COVID pandemic in 2020. It was November of 2020. So we asked the sisters, do you have anywhere that we could take a shower? And so they actually opened up their retreat center to us and all their dormitories, and we were able to shower. But when we had first went to check it out, we drove up and I was with Becky Genia, and we drove to the retreat center, and we just got this gorgeous, beautiful view of the Shinnecock Bay. And it just resonated with us. And again, we could see our territory, and it's just beautiful. And so when this idea came to have our kelp farm, we asked the sisters, and their usual answer for everything that we ask is yes, but we still always ask. And so we asked, can we set up our kelp farm? And it was like, yes, of course. So we're currently in that cabin, but now we're working to expand and have a more permanent space on the retreat center, which is really exciting. And our relationship continues to grow and develop every day. I think it gets stronger in new ways that we really, can't foresee, but we do take it upon ourselves to have the responsibility to shape the future and protect the shoreline. And, we're all women. And the reason I think that we really do it is for our future generations. All of us remember what it was like to have life in the bay, what it was like to walk along the beach and see all the horseshoe crabs and the oysters and the clams and the fish. And it's not something that, is happening right now. And so we want that for our future generations, and me especially. I think my first Zoom with nuns and nuns, I was pregnant with my son Benjamin, and now my first Zoom for land futures, I'm pregnant with twins. And so I'm really excited. If I look a little tired, it's because I'm growing two little humans here, but I'm really excited for their future, and I'll do everything in my power to create a world that I want them to enjoy, our traditions and our culture and our way of life that, again, sustained us here for over 13,000 years. It's something that to us, the past is the future.
Thank you, Tila, and congratulations. You've got a lot of hearts were happening in the chat and in the gallery. And thank you for the work you're doing and the story you've shared. Sister Joan, I'm curious, I'd love to highlight just for a minute or two. I know we want to probably get into some other conversation questions, but just your perspective as a member of a religious community who is entering into relationship with the Shinnecock. Just your sense of like the project you're in right now. When it comes to land justice.
Yeah, well, first I want to say I could sit here all day and listen to Carla, Bridget, and Tila, and the tremendous work that you are about is just so heartening and so hopeful, and so deep appreciation for that, for sure. We have been in, Brentwood, we came to the New York area in 1856, and we're in Brooklyn, then we went to Flushing, and then finally out to Brentwood in the early 1900s. But it was in 1960 that we did have a vacation. Sisters always vacationed by themselves back in the day. So we did have a vacation house, I believe in the West Hampton area. But the story is that the water was quite rough, the waves and the undertide. And so the sisters were looking for another place. So they wandered and they found 81 Lynn Avenue, and they found a statue of St. Joseph in the closet. So they figured this has to be the place. And so since 1960, we purchased it pretty much for vacation, but in more recent years, we do run some retreat programs there. So when you know, Becky sent the email and said, you know, we have this idea that we'd like to run by you. Well, those who know Becky say you really want to listen to this because you know it's going to be good. And so it was kind of ironic that they were asking for access to Shinnecock Bay when it's their ancestral land and the bay bears their name. And so yes, of course, and we wanted to hear more about this. And so we did, and we said, do it, you know, and this is yours, you know, your idea, your project. We are here as friends, as allies and supporters, as learners, you know, in your venture. And so, as Tila said, you know, our mission and our values are so aligned, you know, because we work to bring all into union with God and neighbor. And so that's exactly what they're doing. And that whole movement towards oneness. And you know, in 2015, when we engaged in a really communal process to bring forth our land ethic, you know, we named, you know, what we believed, and it was the whole community of life, you know, which even included the water, the soil. And so when this project came forth, it helped us live into our words, you know, more deeply. And, you know, and then a couple of months later, we had Laudato Si put out by Pope Francis, you know, which was a very gentle pastoral invitation to care for creation. But more recently, he's come out with another letter, Laudato Deum, which is a little bit more visceral and a little bit more prophetic call to conversion. And so how do we live one with? And I think this is just the perfect example. And I will share my screen because I have some pictures too. And just to give you an idea of what Tila was sharing. So this is the towards the eastern end of Long Island. And, you know, the retreat center we have is right here. So this is Shinnecock Bay. And this red circle here is the neck or the reservations that the Shinnecock were forced to live on. All of this, as you can see, this side panel here is the original map. So this is all Shinnecock land, right? And this is the bay waters that they are working to protect. And so it did not go unnoticed that you have these 6 intergenerational indigenous women and Toby from Green Wave. Green Wave, which has been a wonderful supportive organization that you continue to learn from, because it was 6 women and 1 Jesuit who started the Sisters of St. Joseph. And then I'm looking at this Nuns and Luns Land Futures team, you know, here we go. I mean, the numbers, there's a real synchronicity here. So, you know, it's all aligned, and the universe aligns it for sure. So what we've been doing as a result of this, you know, blessing of relationship is we've been having members of the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers, the Neomuck Land Trust, come visit people who are out there on vacation, telling them the story. Because even though they have been here for 13,000 years and have welcomed us as neighbor, lots of people think, oh yeah, once in a while I go to the powwow, and no, they're here, and you need to know what they're about. And so this is the mural that Denise Silva Dennis created, and this is the Return to Good Ground that Tila was speaking about, and it really shares their history on the land. And so in our educating ourselves to know more and to do what is right, we have run retreats. And this is Priscilla Solomon, who is a sister of St. Joseph from Sault Ste. Marie, Canada, who is also a Ojibwe First Nation. And she was part of the Nuns and Nuns Land Justice Project presentations. So, you know, just heighten and expanding our awareness of the Indigenous story, the treatment, the red dress, those who are murdered and go missing. And all of this is pretty new to us. And, you know, even though the Vatican, and that was the other thing, is when the Vatican repudiated the doctrine of discovery, it was an aha moment that so many people weren't aware that, what is this about? So further education. And so we then also experienced the blanket exercise. And it really tells the story of what has happened to the indigenous because of treaties that were not followed, agreements that were just, ripped up and put aside and not followed. And to do this story, to hear this story in the presence of the Shinnecock was very, very powerful. So you start out with all this land, they had this land, and then they were relegated to just one small little area. So there's much work to continue to learn, to reconcile, reparations to be made. Recently, a group organized to go out and have a visit at Ma's house, which is a BIPOC museum curated by Denise, who did the mural out at 81 Lynn Avenue, to bring BIPOC artists in. Lots of people didn't know that this existed. So again, it was a real learning and a wonderful welcome for sure. And then, as friend and ally, when Grandmother Beech Tree is in danger, you go out there and you stand. And so the Shinnecock people called people out. You know that the next day the work stopped. So their prayer is quite powerful. And then the experience, Danny, this is Danny, one of the kelp farmers, and Ben invited me to go out into the waters. And I would say this was the most profound experience of my life. And the only thing I can say, how I would sum it up, is one with, just walking in, and I just felt so connected. And it was just, it's just been a great gift and a blessing. And so what we're doing as part of our focus community is looking at 81 Lynn Avenue. And, we did consult with Becky when we were establishing the goal, but over the course of time, we need to, examine some of our assumptions that, we just thought you take for granted, but to continue to educate ourselves. And as we were doing this, we had other pockets of sisters in the community really coming up with ideas and looking at land, from Brooklyn all the way out to Hampton Bays, and saying, okay, we have this. What is it we need? Where do we need to right size? And where do we need to make reparations? Where do we need to reconcile? And let's put rematriation out there as well.
Thank you, Sister Joan. Wow, y'all, we 90 minutes is not enough. Gosh, well, I'm gonna combine some questions here and just get things going. You've shared about your projects, and like how they've come to be. This is a futuring event, so let's invoke the future. I'm curious what each of you are sensing like out on the horizon for Root Springs, the Shinnecock Kelp Farmers, Movement Generations Canyon site. Like what's just out on the horizon, and you want to see happen, and kind of in the larger picture of the movement for land justice and the futures where it takes root. What's the piece of the story that your project holds, and kind of what other pieces do you think are really necessary? So I'm combining some questions here, and I know that's unfair, but answer it as you would like to. Whoever wants to go first can just bring the center.
I'll jump in. Hey everyone, Bridget here again from Root Springs. And as I mentioned before, what's right on the horizon for us? So the reason we went into it, we have been renovating our wellness center since mid-June. So we've been closed since mid-June of last year. And the reason why we spent so much time and energy and our resources renovating this space is that a lot of folks gave us the feedback that it's great, again, for individuals, but we really wanted to make the space better for groups coming out and having more community focused retreats and being able to be a space where more folks can come together to convene together in community. So that is what's right on the horizon for us. We were about a month out of reopening, and I am just so excited to welcome folks back to the land, the folks that have been there before and can get to witness all of the new updates and upgrades and sharing the space in a new way, and then to welcome a lot of new folks that have not been to the land. We've gained quite a bit of recognition over the last year, even while being closed, which is great. So we have people like really itching to come. And so I'm really excited about welcoming folks back onto the land because that's why we exist. In terms of where we really see ourselves in terms of land project, you know, land can do so many different things. We can be in relationship with land in so many different ways. And one thing that we are really focused on is being a space of rest and respite above everything else, more than growing. You know, there's some spaces popping up that are growing food and being more of like BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, Native foodways, which is amazing. But really at the center for us, it is about where can you go to rest? Where can you go to take that breath? I was fortunate to be out on the land this past weekend, and I did a site visit with somebody who's hosting a retreat. She's from the Iranian community and hosts spiritual dancing and is planning a spiritual dancing retreat for the summer solstice. And when we were at the very beginning of the tour, she sat down on one of the benches, kind of up along one of the prairies, and she just kind of had to take a few breaths and just sit for a minute. She lives in the city, and she said that she didn't even realize how, like, when you live in a city, your nervous system is in constant movement in a certain way that you don't even notice until you are out in a space that invites you and that you can even feel invited into to relax and be at peace. And it was really beautiful just like witnessing her have that moment for herself. She brought her 2-year-old out with her as well. And so the two of them just kind of coming together and being out on this space. She said she had never brought her baby boy Rio like out that far before in Minnesota, but it's something that she wanted for him. So I think that really I hear time and time again, especially from queer folks, Black, Native, Brown folks, and folks that find themselves at those intersections, saying that, you know, especially in rural spaces, many of us don't know which parts of our identities we're allowed to bring with us. You know, can I show up being Black, but then push my queerness down? Can I show up being queer but I have to, you know, put on a performative accent or whatever else? So just knowing, I feel like people really know that when they come out to Root Springs, that it's also a space where we can hold space for all of your intersecting identities. As queer Black women, as being queer Black women run, I think that people give themselves that permission a lot quicker than if the identities of the land takers would be different. And I think this is the piece that's really important, I think, for folks to hold, because I think that it can be easy for folks to say, well, everyone's welcome. Everyone's welcome. We've never said that certain people aren't welcome, but who is in the space and who is there, who is physically present and representing and holding the space, is a huge part of making sure that folks that have been consistently, generationally disenfranchised from these lands feel that it is a place for them to come back to and also experience sometimes for the first time. To answer the third part of the question in terms of what I'm seeing and what's needed, is we were a part of that round of funding, which we here in Minnesota and probably nationwide called the George Floyd funding, where there was a huge, massive response of money, especially getting infused into us very early on. We were really right place, right time for the atrocity that we witnessed here in Minnesota in our communities. And so a lot of organizations and foundations were pumping money into us early on, which was great. And here we are a few years out now, and some of those funding sources have changed their priorities or whatever else. And here we are still needing support, being a very young operating nonprofit. And the question that we're really holding and moving forward with is who is going to fund the rest? We all agree that BIPOC folks, queer folks are exhausted, have been, will continue to be. We need spaces for us, by us, to rest. And then the question is like, who's going to really step up and continue to fund the rest? Not long term, not just when there's incredible damage happening, not when we're at a space where we really need to be internally grieving, but in these times where we're able to use more of our energy and resources to move forward. And so we really need folks, more than anything else, we are in need of folks making sure that they can think about how to bring resources and finding.
Bridget, we might have lost your audio real quick. But I think it's safe to say financial resources was perhaps the rest of that sentence.
Financial resources.
Okay, I see you in the chat. Dollar bills, people, dollar bills. That is something that is needed. Bridget, is it all right if we move into other folks answering? I see you've muted, so I'm guessing that's true, but thank you so much for your answer and for the priority of rest in a time of polycrisis and in a time that lands differently on different bodies, and the identities that they hold and how critical that is for a just transition. Carla, Tila, what are you seeing? What's on the horizon? What's your spot? What else is in the neighborhood that is needing to be lifted up?
I'm happy to jump in if that's okay, Tila, unless you were ready to go. Okay. Thank you so much for that share. My gosh, I'm really moved by everything you were just sharing. So thank you so much. So let me remember your question. I think you were combining kind of like what's the gem, right, in the land justice landscape of our project and something on the horizon. You know, I was thinking about this, and what feels really special to me, and we're a 10-person collective, and if you asked any one of us, you'd probably get a diverse answer. But I think co-stewarding along with the original peoples is really special. We're not the only case, right? For sure. But at least in the other land projects immediately around our area that we're in direct relationship with, there's, other projects where the land is being stewarded by Native folks, including Native folks in the area, like the Cultural Conservancy's Heron Shadow site, right, in the North Bay. And then there are lots of projects, most of the projects that I know of, where there might be, a blessing, or the local Native folks, they come and see, they have access, but they're not part of the governance structure formally, so, and that's okay. I'm not bringing that as a criticism per se. I'm just naming that it makes our situation unique, again, at least in the projects around us. And co-stewarding, we've been co-stewarding with them since even before the title was transitioned, really, since we began considering the idea of raising the money to liberate the site. Already at that point, it's like we were spiritually stewarding the process together, right? Listening for understanding, aligning. How are our values going to lead to what actions, right? And of course, the process of securing the land completely feels really special. And just to give one clear example, like even though we are, operationally using the site day to day, we are not going to name the site Movement Generation. The naming process is going to happen with the original peoples, right? So Sigorte will be leading that process, and they will bring one of the Bay Miwok elders that they're in relationship with to the site, so the elder can listen to the land express what its name is, you know. So, and we won't have anything to do with that. There were other sort of policies, guidelines, understandings, agreements, whatever you want to call them, for the land, that the Sigorte Land Trust set from the very beginning, like what terms of tenancy will look like, right? Yeah, I see the text that says it makes me teary. I know, me too. It really does. It's really dreamy and humbling. And then just to say real quick, what's related to this, what's on the horizon for us is our design of the whole site. I'm super excited to be one of two people who's the other person is Desiree Fontenot, who probably folks have heard. Yeah, Desi's amazing leadership in this project is really important. But yeah, we are conducting a permaculture design process. I just spent the whole day this last Friday with our two permaculture design consultants and one of our we call them political homies, or our friends that came through to one of our permaculture for the people courses that we held. This one was in 2015, and we spent the whole day observing the land. And this is one of the ways that we are going to express our healing work, right? We are not steeped in a culture of consent here in this country, right? The very founding, everything has been said, everybody knows. Consent is not part of our approach historically, or of the people who have held power in this nation state. So for us, this is a huge opportunity to heal that, right? Because in permaculture, like other resilient design systems, agroecology and things like that, there's an emphasis on composing with the land, not imposing on the land, right? So we are really spending a lot of time like watching the water flow, the wind blow, the animals migrate, the plants emerge after a controlled burn. What is the land telling us about what has been there, what can be there, what wants to be there? And that is going to guide our design process. And I'm so proud of us for doing that. And the fact that it can be then a demonstration site where other people can observe this way of being with the land. Just feels beautiful. So I'll stop because I see there's just a few minutes left for somebody else to share. Thank you.
I'll just touch on the healing. I think that there's so many aspects of healing the land, but also healing some of the harm and the heartbreak. The heartbreak that we experience from the loss of our land is passed down generation to generation, and sometimes it's so strong. Even now, I'll cry thinking about my great grandmother and her inability to harvest the foods that sustained her family. And so we're healing ourselves also, by returning to the land and taking care of the land and regenerating and restoring. But there's also work, I think, to be done in the larger community in healing. And with the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, we're starting now with Sister Joan to develop our own script of the blanket exercise so that we can heal others. And I think through this process of truth and reconciliation, I think it's a painful process that folks have to go through, but a necessary one. And it's something that we want to do together so that we can complete this healing cycle of everyone involved: Indigenous people, people who have their origins and settlers, and people who want to see a different way and who want to learn from those harms in order to heal. I think that we can collectively heal our whole society by reconnecting with the land and reconnecting with one another, because that's ultimately what's the most important. We have to not only take care of ourselves, but take care of Mother Earth and all of creation. And I think that's where we'll find a very, bright and abundant future collectively.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you, Tila. Yeah, I guess, we're coming up on the hour. I think we'll probably be a couple of minutes late. We'll also, we'll be sending up a follow-up email with invitations for how folks in the audience can support these projects, ways that are invited and requested at this moment. And I really want to honor, the vision and the horizon that y'all are speaking to, Bridget, Carla, and Tila, and in centering the vision of Black, Indigenous, and people of color led land regenerative stewardship. And I want to just before we end, we have a room full of sisters, and Sister Joan, I would love to know, from your perspective, what is on the horizon for you? What does participating and moving in solidarity with land justice, what does that mean for the future of religious life? How are you called to the horizon? What do you see?
Well, religious congregations have a responsibility to their members and the good stewardship of their resources, right? But we've always moved, out from ourselves to the ones who are in need. And, I think different religious congregations are at different points in terms of their resources and their membership needs and whatnot. For Brentwood, we're blessed, and so what has happened recently, I think the work of the focus community and other committees bringing their conversation to the larger community, and it's really been a great wake up for us to realize how blessed we are. And in listening to the stories of those who are blessed, but have had, things taken from them, unjustly. And especially our friends, the Shinnecox, once how can you not act in right ways? So I'm even thinking, as they showed, Tila was showing the pictures of the hatchery, and to do any kind of building construction in New York State, all these permits, and it's difficult. And, we're trying to get a permit to construct a permanent building for the hatchery, but we can't get it. So my question is, well, why are we disassembling because how they put this hatchery together, it's intense, labor, very time consuming. And so what does it mean? That we don't have that cottage for vacation? We don't have that cottage for vacation, So I think it's these little things, this awareness that once we know, and it's been hard, and it shouldn't be that hard. So how are we lightening, the burden that has been placed on the BIPOC community and the privilege that we have, and how are we using that privilege in ways to reconcile and make right? So I think, I can't speak for all religious congregations. I can't fully speak for my own. Just as I am a member, and but I know many Sisters of St. Joseph are feeling this. And, what is ours to do now? And it is, I just see a question about maybe here, future, how church protected legal status. Okay. Yeah. And, and what we're doing, especially in Brentwood too, is with some easements and land trust. Not that that's the only way to protect land, but we do have some of those in place that protects the land in Brentwood. And then we have the Shinnecock kelp farmers protecting it in Hampton Bays. And so I think it's up to each congregation to really look at, what they can do. And I know that there are many who are seriously looking at this and doing good things, of which I'm grateful.
Thank you, Joan. I've heard you speak to just the transformation that it happens because of relationship, and in the Shinnecock, calling you to be water protectors with them. And and just, yeah, I want to underscore like the importance of, you know, as people who have been the primary beneficiaries of a system that stole from people, Indigenous, Black people, other people of color, you know, what is our responsibility then to make right? And as you say, once you know, you can't not know, and there
Right.
and we are compelled to act. So thank you for your leadership in your community, in the Focus Community Program, in being a consistent voice for that. We are coming up on the hour, and there's so much more we could talk about. We will send out a follow-up with particular invitations for support, the ways that you can become involved with each of these projects. But to close, I would love for us to just spend 2 minutes or so sending blessing to each of these projects. Maybe if you want to write in the chat real quick, like what's one blessing or one phrase that you want to send to these groups, these projects, you can add it to the chat. And folks we can give 20 seconds or so to do that. But we're just, maybe if everyone would let's start in the east. Let's start with the Shinnecock kelp farmers and Brentwood out there. And if you just want to spend a moment and send your blessings for abundant support and grace, whatever your blessing is. I know this is working because this is a room full of people who know how to pray. We're going to now move to the Midwest, to Bridget and the folks at Root Springs, doing good work of rest and refuge. And so if you can face towards where Root Springs and Bridget are, we're going to send blessing their way. Thank you for your work. And finally, let's give that love to the West. It's the folks on Bay Miwok and Lisjan-Ohlone territory, Movement Generation, and Carla and Desi. I know I'm gonna turn and send our blessings to them. Thank you all. May it be so. Those blessings, and thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Bridget and Tila and Carla and Sister Joan. And thank you all for being here and joining us with this, with this land justice spell, this spell across Turtle Island, and this spell and invocation for land justice futures, for featuring this movement together.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much, Sarah. You were an amazing hostess. Thank you.
Thanks,
Oh, thank you. Thank you
Carla,
everyone.
Tila, Bridget.
Thank you all.
Wonderful.
Go, Joan, too.
You lift us up for sure.
Thanks for making Easter possible.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Suzanne. It's good to hear about your work in the chat.
I'm excited to connect. I'll reach out. Thank you so much.
Please do.
All right. Peace, sisters.
Bye. Oh, I'll stop recording.
Us off spotlight so we can see people's faces on their way out.
Great.